Hey guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at AUDUSD. I've got some analysis that I would like to do on this pair, and I'm going to be sharing it with you guys and talking about some potential setups and ideas for this pair specifically. Now, if you know our Sunday specials that we do, basically where I go through a bunch of different markets, I kind of hit a bunch of different things and then move on from them. But today, or this week, I guess, the special video is going to be on AUDUSD because this is one that I think has some really interesting setups with it. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually take a look at a couple different time frames, but we're going to start on the daily chart. Now, what I want you guys to see here is if we scroll out on the daily chart, notice that for a very long time, we had a very strong, prolonged downtrend on the Australian dollar. In fact, I was trading it during this time right here when we saw the crazy stuff happening in March and April, right? The market absolutely tanked on the Australian dollar, and I just kept I kept looking at Australian news because I was like, what is going on? Why is this thing selling off so incredibly hard? And there was just bad news after bad news, quantitative easing, right? People printing money, bankruptcies, all this sort of unemployment stuff. There was just terrible news across the world, and it seemed like the Australian dollar was definitely not exempt from that, because during this time it was absolutely crazy. But the funny thing is, or not really the funny, but the interesting thing is how fast things really can flip the other direction once things start to get back above the 200 period moving average. Now, the 200 period moving average is this big red line, and if you've watched my channel for a while, if you've watched my analysis, it's a chart indicator that I keep on for the most part, like all the time, because it is a long-term, for me, it's one of the best long-term indicators of the trend. Now, not just the 200 period moving average, but more specifically the 200-day moving average gives us an idea of what the market has been doing for a little bit bigger of a horizon, right? So those long-term trends that can be very, very strong in the currency market, stock market, the 200-day can be a great indicator to kind of see some of that. Now, the big reason I bring it up is because after this crazy crash that we saw back in April and March, we actually saw a really strong rally that even led into a brand new trend. And this is sometimes what we see happen in trends, is they get very, very strong right before they absolutely crumble. So we saw this market absolutely go crazy to the downside before all of a sudden reversing on a dime. Things started turning around for the Aussie dollar, and we broke above that 200 period moving average. That's a huge, huge breakthrough that, you know, I honestly did not, back here, I was actually bearish on the Australian dollar, thinking that price could come down from there just because, again, that long-term trend was so strong. However, I was incorrect about that, and now we look at the Australian dollar, which has continued to not only get through that 200 period moving average, but prolong and stay above that 200 period for quite some time. You can actually see price even staying above the 20 period, which is this light blue color, for quite some time as well. Now, that is not necessarily, just because something is over or under a moving average does not mean, oh, it's going up or it's going down from here. The idea is, okay, well, that just tells us how strong or weak price has been. Now we can actually go and take a look at some of the price action to talk about that. Now, let me give you guys a little bit of the bullish and bearish case here on Aussie dollar. Now, the bullish case is that we have seen, again, incredible buy the dip opportunities all the way up on this move. And in fact, a lot of people are still preferring the Australian dollar over the US dollar because of how much printing or, you know, fear of the US dollar is right now. People are preferring things that are a little bit more risky, like the Australian dollar, right? A lot of times during, I've said this many times on my channel, but usually during times of fear historically, the US dollar is a preferred currency. So people want to put their money when they're afraid into something that seems a little bit more stable, like the US dollar historically. Now, things after the kind of the roar back that we've seen post March and April, things have been very, very good for things like the Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, the pound, right? We've seen some of that strong comeback. Now, I don't think that that is necessarily over, and we also can get that idea just by looking at the technicals. So the fundamentals there and the technicals somewhat agree to the extent that, okay, we are above that 200 period moving average. We've switched directions here on the long-term trend, and dips keep getting bought on this market. Now, with that said, the bearish case here is that we do recently have something interesting here. We kind of have this downward trend line, and there's a couple different setups that I see just off the bat from looking at this. If we actually bring it down to the 4-hour chart, we can actually see that this counter trend seems pretty strong for now. We have this kind of downward movement. Let's see if we can just get another trend line here in this kind of downward movement on the AUD-USD pair, but the overall trend there, again, still very, very bullish. So when I look at this, the big thing that I'm currently looking for is a break above. And that's why I wanted to talk about this week, because it does seem like we have some strength coming into this week. Now, if that persists, there could be a decent setup in my view. I'll share that with you guys right now. So the idea here is that if we were to be able to bust through this counter trend, to me what that says is, okay, well, if we're able to bust through the counter trend, the idea is that the overall trend very well may bust out and continue to roar to the upside. Now, in order for me to get involved with something like that, I'm interested in seeing some sort of break of this downward trend line, right? Lots of bearishness in this area. If that can break, looking for something like the retest and going long is a trade setup that I would take over and over again, because it is with the strong trend. It is looking for a breakout and is looking for some sort of retest. That gives me one of my favorite trade setups, which is basically the break and retest concept of a major trend line or resistance level or support level if we're going down, right? And looking to get involved with that. Now, where would you place a target here? Well, for me, I like the idea of just moving to the highs if you like to use take profits. Personally, you guys, if you've watched some of my trade ideas or my live trading videos, you know that I don't put a strict take profit on a lot of my trades. I like to trail stops if price goes my way, because that could actually favor a situation in which we move past those highs and just keep going, right? How many times have you seen a trend break through the recent high and just explode and keep going? It's actually fairly common when a market is in heavy momentum. And so I like to not cap my winners by only trailing stops and looking for those trades to really, really run and continue in my favor. So with that said, I personally would probably, if I was to take this trade, would not even put a target. But for those people who, most people prefer to place a target on their trade, I'd say that this area is not a bad place to at least consider in your analysis, because we've got this previous high level. It very well could be a resistance. You can see we had this kind of double top here, or I guess on the lower time frames it'd be a double top, but it kind of looks like tweezer tops here if you're familiar with that candlestick pattern. I don't get super into the candlesticks or by their names. I more just look at the way they react. So you can see we came up to this level last time and very quickly shot down, and we reversed. So that might be an area where we could see some struggle for buyers. Now, in terms of a stop loss, one level that I like here is risking something like 135 pips, I believe. Let me see if that's right. Let me see if I just go from here. Yeah, so about 135 pips or so, which is a little bit bigger of a stop loss, I'm aware, but with a small lot size here, I wouldn't be too afraid of that sort of trade, because we also have a lot more on the upside. We have 100, maybe even 200 pips, depending on where you put a target there. That might be something to look into. Now, I also like the idea here of keeping my stop in relation to this counter trend uptrend, right? So again, long term, we're talking uptrend on the AUD-USD. Short term here on the 4-hour chart, we've got kind of a downtrend forming. Now, for us to, again, to consider, for me, the bullish side of things, I would want to see the breakout of that counter trend, and I'd want to see, this kind of upward momentum hold nicely, meaning I don't want to get stopped out, obviously. And if I get stopped out, then my analysis may not have been as correct as I had hoped for. So we'll see if we get some sort of setup like this. That's one that I am looking out for this week, just as one example of something that kind of caught my eye here on the AUD-USD. Again, if I actually end up taking this trade, I will be sharing it with members inside of the A1 trading community. Inside of the group, we share all of our trades. We have a couple different analysts in all the major different time sessions. We actually just added someone who's in the Australian time session or Asian time session. He's from Australia, which makes it super cool because we've got people that share trades and alerts and ideas throughout each major session. There's also a chat room. There's also a bunch of training material on all sorts of good stuff. So check that out. Link in the description if you're interested. I hope this was helpful to you. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.